You're listening to the best of season 4. And what a season season 4 was.
We are so excited to deliver you some best ofs from season 4. Hope you guys enjoy the best of season 4. We were at a place where we're starting now. You were actually in a pretty good place as far as like Kairos was kicking. It was starting to pick up some business.
Everything was established.
You had your girlfriend.
Had the girl.
Found your biological dad.
Oh, my dad. I even put his name on the menu.
I feel like we all know these seasons that we go into that you just feel like, man, I've got momentum here.
Yeah.
And it feels like you had momentum at this time, right?
I was in a good place. It was an exciting time. It was an exciting time with Kairos. I'd started doing Fox 6 cooking segments, and then they were like telling me, we're getting more requests for your recipes than usual, so you need to keep it coming. And they started giving me more spots, and then they put me on the noon news. And
so really quick, just to recap for those that don't know, you were on Fox 6. You were doing these cooking segments during their news.
Yeah, during the news segments.
Yeah.
And then, well, it wasn't just Fox 6 then. The Birmingham News started coming to me for recipes. They did like stories on, there was one particular lady, Lynn Grizzard woman. She just fell in love with Kairos, but she was a customer too.
Right.
But she was in love with Kairos and with the story. And so every opportunity she got to write something on me, she wrote it on me. And it was neat. But I would always share my recipes. I had one recipe that I wouldn't share, and that was Granny's Rolls, because that's my secret recipe. Everything else I'll share every one of them. So
you were getting a lot of media presence, and
yes.
Which I guess was, I mean, like we said, it's like a snowball effect in the right direction, which is bringing you more business,
it is
exposure.
So good for business. Then my newsletter was growing. I was just in a place at Kairos where I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I started understanding this is why I'm supposed to be doing it.
And why were you supposed to be doing it?
Well, I always felt like I was supposed to be involved in ministry.
Yeah.
But I was also in the food business, and I love that. In the beginning, I didn't see it before we opened, but I saw it after. People who are going through tough seasons of life just felt, because my story had been made public, they felt like they could come and talk to me. And guys coming out of prison, people coming out of addiction. We started working with a safe house for women that were coming out of like abusive situations, and they became my staff. And it wasn't a thing where you don't want to, if you're going to work in a restaurant, you don't want that to be your long-term career,
right?
But I started noticing a pattern, was that it was like a landing space for people. They could get back on their feet. I couldn't pay them a lot of money, but I was paying them the best I could.
Yeah. And
then they go through a process of putting their life back together, and then they would move on. And that, something about that, just like, this is ministry. This is real life stuff. And I can't tell you the stories. I mean, I could tell you the stories if I sat down and did them all. But just dozens and dozens and dozens of stories of people that came. They worked with me maybe 6 months, a year, got their life back together, and just kept going. And I got to be involved in so many, especially the women that came. They reminded me of my mom, like people that had been broken. And we would always, when they got their home or their first apartment or whatever, we'd always give them a housewarming party. And it was just, I don't know. I remember I was on like the 7th or 8th one of those, and it was just like, this is really neat. I really like this because I'm doing what I love. Food is my passion. It's what I want to do. But at the same time, I'm getting to help people. And it was pretty cool. It made it special. Really, your parents moving to Gardendale, this was a neat connection of how we connected and became Team Jones.
Absolutely. I mean, if they hadn't made that move from Pensacola, which, like, when I flew over, I mean, they had lived there over 30 years. They had built a house when I think I was 4 or 5. They built this house on the bay. And so when I flew back in 2009, I mean, going through that house in my childhood room, and I mean, it was a lot of things in that house, you can imagine.
Was it hard, like emotionally? Just thinking that your house wasn't going to be there anymore?
Yeah, I mean, that was a weird feeling because I remember, I mean, I was very young, but it's one of my very few memories opposed to you. But like when the house was being built and when it wasn't done, I don't know if you've ever walked into a house that's in the middle of construction. And my brother and I, because my sister was a newborn baby, picking our rooms. You know, this is going to be my room, this is going to be my room. Because there was 2 rooms that were very similar.
Wow, I haven't even thought about Abby. She never knew another home.
No.
Wow, that's neat.
So, but picking our rooms, like when it was just, what do you call, like the framework was up and you could, and, you know, just having that memory and just all the yard work and my dad made us do. And, I mean, I'm not as sentimental as you are. So it wasn't like painful. It was just kind of weird, you know, but also neat because when I was with my dad we had like a pool house next to our pool and kind of going and getting boxes that had been there for 30 years that they had not. And some of it was like their original china or like dishes they got from their wedding back in that I had never seen before. So that was really fun.
That's neat.
No, I mean, they literally just got to Alabama.
So the way I remember the story, I don't know if you told me this or Abby told me, was that they went to a church in Pensacola that had small groups, and that's what they liked.
That's right.
So she typed into the Google.
Yeah.
And said,
she Googled it, yeah.
What are some churches in Birmingham, Alabama? Because Gardendale's north of Birmingham, it's Birmingham Metro. What are some churches in Birmingham, Alabama that have small groups? And what popped up?
So Church of the Highlands popped up, naturally.
So that was 2009. They'd been around about 8 years. But by that time, Church of the Highlands had a big campus, and they were rocking and rolling.
But my parents had never gone to big church. We had never grown up in big churches at all.
By big church, you mean like mega church?
I mean, like where there's a lot of people attending, I guess. I mean, several years, my parents actually were a part of helping plant a church.
Small churches.
Yeah, I mean, they were working, but very small.
I was the same. Up until the time, never mind. Don't let me interject.
Okay.
Y'all went to Church of the Highlands. What was your first...
So, I mean, it was very kind of just like, we're going to visit this where we're going to church this Sunday, you know. There was nothing deep about it. So we went into church together, and my dad was like, whoa, it's like Jesus World in here, because it was so big.
What's Jesus World?
Like, you know, like Disney World, except Jesus World. And you know, he made jokes about the check-in for the kids, like, they're going to implant chips so they know, like, beep. And I think he called it, like, Circus of the Highlands, because everybody was like, hey, so big.
Hey. Well, I was familiar with Highlands because when they launched in 2001, they were in my area where I lived. But I knew they were meeting in a gym at Mount Brook High School. And sometime around this time, we were doing catering, and I didn't usually deliver the catering. I had a catering delivery guy. But it was one Sunday, they ordered like a meal for like 20 people, and for some reason I had to deliver it. And I'd never been. I didn't know that it was that big. And I was just dumbfounded. Like, this is like Fort Knox. I mean, it's so big I couldn't figure out where to go in. I was calling the lady.
Jesus World.
It was humongous. The lady was like, no, you got to go in the east entrance and you got to come to this and do that. And I was like, whatever y'all are doing here, it is on fire. This is huge. So what were your thoughts about it?
I mean, it was a little overwhelming, but you got to remember at that time, I was like, oh, my flight's leaving the next day.
The very next day?
Yeah, I'm going to church with my family, and there was no kind of... Visiting that church was the afterthought to all the things. My parents had just made this huge move.
It was just something you were doing.
Yeah.
Kind of like checking a box, maybe?
Yeah, because, I mean, we go to church. You know, my family's always gone to church, so they're going to find a church to go to. And so we went in, we went to church, and that particular Sunday, Pastor Chris, who's the main pastor, for those that don't know that. Yeah, the senior pastor.
And he gives the messages, and generally at the beginning of a year, he gives a message to kind of lay out the year.
Right.
So this was the first message of 2010. And the reason why I'm highlighting this, I feel like this changed my life, even though I didn't even know it was happening. But and I went back and listened to this message, especially the first couple of years after we were married. I listened to this message over and over and over because it's what got you here.
Yeah, I see. I didn't know you had listened to it over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
So it was My Five, or it was called Five or My Five, one of those. You
Actually,
probably know better.
It was a message series, and he was telling you to find your five, your
five,
top
yeah.
5 values, and then take those top 5 values, write them down, and do something every day, even if it's a small thing. Every day, do something, some kind of action. Take some kind of an action step on your top 5 values, and that he was saying it'll change your life if you do it.
Right. So the whole message idea is exactly what you just said, but the way he presented it was it was not. I didn't feel like it was trying to like make me do anything or condemn me or.
Yeah, it was.
I remember him making the statement or something. This is in my own words. But does your life reflect the things that you value?
The most. Like
the things that you say you value and that are important to you. Mm-hmm. Can you see that in your life? So it was very it's a great question, And the first step in doing that is, I think, articulating and thinking about what do I value? What are my top 5? And so, it really just planted a seed in me and inspired me, I guess, and I remember I flew back, the next day to Sweden.
Did you find your 5?
And I wrote down my 5. I wrote down my 5. I was like, I like this idea. And, I'm in education at the time, so I literally made a chart for my condo of like my 5 and then a little checkbox for every day. Because
you put it on your refrigerator?
What he had said is like, for example, if one of your values is like your friends or people, like you want to add value to them, and it doesn't have to be, and this is what kind of hooked me.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something that takes you an hour to do. It can be literally, he said, you like write on their Facebook wall, like send them send them a text, like something that literally would take me 2 seconds to do, but it's being intentional about like, I've decided this is important to me, so let me live by that.
But the key to that is doing it every day.
Doing it every day. So, he actually said, I remember, you don't have to do all of them every day, but at least do one of them every day. And that was 2 for me, because anything for me, if it feels too overwhelming,
you're not going to do it.
I just check out. Like, it's like, it's a great idea.
I'm out. Mm-hmm.
But that, how he presented it, it sounded like, that's something I can do. I can do that.
Yeah.
And so...
Do you mind sharing, like, what your 5 were?
So...
You don't have to do the whole 5, but I know that, just for the sake of time, one of your top 5 was family.
Okay, so this is what, got me to Alabama, essentially.
So you wrote on their family, and you had the checkbox on your refrigerator.
Right.
And you had to look at it.
Right.
Every day.
Every day. And so, it started with just, like I said, like texting my mom, because I'm very bad about anyone that's close to me. Mm-hmm. For any certain time knows that I can be very bad at keeping in touch. I'm not proud of it, and I think I've gotten better. But just reaching out, to my mom. And so, yes, family was on my list.
So this little exercise that Pastor Chris gave you was actually he gave you a tool to be able to do what you wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And if y'all are listening to this and you're friends with Haley and you get upset when she don't return texts, I'm married to her, and I know and believe that she loves me. I'm her top person in this world, and she does the same to me. So it's not, she doesn't do it on purpose. It's just how she's wired. She's always in the moment.
I try to get better. But anyway, so family's on that list, but through kind of that seed that was planted and then me kind of taking the step to do something different and to live out what I decided was important to me. Nobody decided. Like, I like that Pastor Chris did not tell me what to put on there or, what should be on my list. Yeah. Like, I got to decide that.
That's he's a leader that I love to follow because that's how he leads. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. He always says, you're accountable to Jesus for yourself. Mm-hmm. And if he don't want you to do something, he'll tell you.
Right.
You'll know. Don't don't do what I do, because everybody's on a different path.
Right.
So I love that.
My sheep hear my voice. So through that process of deciding those 5 things, writing them down, making the chart. I wasn't perfect, but I was definitely more aware of it, more intentional about it. And over the next few months, I just started thinking, okay, family is important to me. My family and those relationships are very important to me. Mm-hmm. So I moved away from my childhood home. I moved away from my parents when I was 18.
Yeah.
And I graduated, went off to school, and I hadn't been back since. And so the first year and a half I went to junior college, but I still moved out and got an apartment. Then I went to a school that was 6 hours away in St. Augustine, Florida. And I went from there to Miami. Then I went from Miami to London, then London to Sweden. And so here I am, 30 years old, and this is, maybe normal, but had not lived close to my parents since I was 18.
Wow.
And so thinking that, man, I'm obviously an adult now, like full-on adult.
Obviously.
30 years old. And I don't really know what my relationship looks like with my parents as an adult to adult. Not child to adult, which is what it was when I left, when I was 18, but just that new, and feeling like I wanted to explore that, and I wanted to have that. I wanted to be in relationship with my parents as an adult, because I knew that looks totally different than it was when I was 18. So, yeah, that just, kept coming back to me and kept coming back to me. And anyway, so it was that seed back when we visited Church of the Highlands and My Five, that value, that fast forward, was it, gosh, so I had one more semester, when you're in the education world. Yeah. And somewhere in between there, I started entertaining the idea of moving to Alabama.
Wow.
Which, if you knew me then, if you knew me then at all, my friends there were like shocked. I was like, well, I'm moving to Birmingham. Everyone thought I was moving to Birmingham, England.
But they didn't call it Birmingham. They called it Birmingham.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, no, I'm not moving to England, because that would be a more normal move.
From Sweden.
When I said Birmingham, Alabama, the look on people's faces was amazing. So,
we don't want to leave on a low note. Haley's living in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yes.
Specifically Gardendale.
Well, actually, I was not living in Gardendale at the time. Well, yeah, I was. I was in the apartment with my parents. Yeah.
So you went from Gardendale, and we'll tell that story later. But you're here. I'm here. You're free. Ready to mingle. I'm free. Ready to mingle.
You're free. Just escaped death's claws.
Yeah. But I had really one more stop to make on that journey before I got to you.
And we will pick up there next time.
Should we say what we'll pick up with?
No.
It kind of
it's called a
name.
Cliffhanger.
I know I was going to say the name.
The name of what?
Karina.
Oh, you were supposed to wait.
Well, I can cut it out.
Okay.
Well, I'll wait. I don't know. Let's just say the name.
Fun, though.
We'll pick it. Okay. All right. So you're single and ready to mingle. I'm single and ready to mingle as well.
I don't know about that, yeah,
but I did have one more stop I would have to take on the journey to get to Haley Ann Hobart Jones.
No, that's a cliffhanger.
I did. There was all this stuff happened at one time.
Right.
So there was a lot packed in here. I guess if you look back on the story and you say that I was engaged to her, it is confusing. But we didn't just meet each other and get engaged.
Yeah.
We met, then there was a process where I was like, I would never date you, and then we started dating, and then I couldn't anymore, and I ended it with her.
Okay.
And I was done. I even told her, you need to go find another job. You can't work here. I feel like Steve talked me into this, and this is not something I wanted. It's something I knew wasn't going to work out anyways, and I'm just not doing this. So I broke it off with her.
So then after you broke it off is about that time when you found your brother.
I did. That was about the spring of 2011.
So let's recap the details real quick about how long it had been since you'd seen him.
Yeah.
And is it true that you had no contact at all with him until this point? And did you just, all the questions about that.
Okay, I had one brief contact with him after I got out of prison. He was, my two top things was, I need to find my biological father and I need to find my brother.
Okay.
And I told people, I actually have this in a journal, that my brother got it worse than me. So I said, I believe he's probably either dead or in prison. And just after going through counseling and realizing just all the
just the dysfunction and stuff that we grew up in and all the pain and the heartache. And when I got out of prison in 1999, there was a new thing out called Google. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Well, I hadn't up to that point. My cousin LaDonna in Phoenix City, she told me I can find anybody with this new internet thing. And we found his aunt, and I reconnected with his aunt, Janet, who was my aunt when I was growing up.
Right.
And she told me that he was in prison in Florida. So it was crazy. Like, I predicted that. I said that.
Right.
But we actually found out that at one point, when he first was arrested, he was a youthful offender, that he was at Lancaster and I was at Brevard, and we could have been at the same camp. We were
Wow.
at the same time. But his was different. His wasn't really like crime.
Mm-hmm.
His was like drugs and anger.
Yeah.
I think his first one was he beat somebody up in Florida, in Panama City, went to prison for it.
Okay, so you found him briefly when you first got out of prison. Did you make contact there?
I wrote one letter, he wrote one letter, and then he got transferred somewhere else and we lost contact.
Okay.
And I felt like it's just not the time to try to reconnect with him.
Okay, so that was 99.
Yeah.
So now fast forward to 2011.
Yeah.
And did you decide like, okay, now it's time?
No, I always pray for him and I always keep that, and I always felt like when the time was right, it would happen, just like it did with my biological father.
And I'm going to remind people right now before you say how you found him, just
Yeah.
because this always just hurts my heart, just about how he was taken from you almost overnight.
Yeah.
And you were how old? 10?
I was 10, he was 5.
And he was 5.
Yeah.
And y'all were just buddies. And, you almost felt like he was your kid, your baby.
He was my baby when
Yeah.
he came home.
And so that changed overnight when his dad took him
And just left.
And
I never would have thought that would have been the last time I saw him.
And from that point, when you were 10 years old,
Yeah.
the next time you made contact was in 1999.
Yes.
When you were, okay. So heart-wrenching. So fast forward.
Wait, no, pause.
Yeah.
There was one. I'm sorry. Just as I'm telling the story, it comes back.
Yeah.
When I was 17, I believe it was the same weekend that I found out that my dad was not really my dad.
Uh-huh.
My granddaddy was recovering from heart surgery. He was eating breakfast and he was like talking, and he said something about my stepdad, and he said his name, that he died. And I was like, what are you talking about? And my granny said, oh, he's just rambling. And my dad said, he's just rambling. And I said, is he dead? He's dead? And my granny said, I think so. I heard something. You'd have to call Denise and ask. And Denise was my aunt, my dad's sister. Mm-hmm. But she was friends with my stepdad. They grew up in the same neighborhood. Mm-hmm. She was the one that actually, my Aunt Denise was the one that introduced my stepdad to my mom while she was still married to my dad. So it's just all twisted up.
Right.
But that was always a source of conflict with the Joneses.
So the guy that we're talking about is dead at this point. Your grandfather was your stepdad, which was Mike's dad.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So I found that out, and I called my mom because I knew if he's dead, we can go get my brother. And this would have been 7 years later. So I called my mom, and she started crying. I was like, I don't know, but you need to figure it out. We need to go get my brother. And her and her current husband, I think it was husband number 4, they came and picked me up at my granny's house, brought my meemaw, because my meemaw, bless her heart, she grieved so much over my brother. That was just a hard situation. And we went to where he was at his grandmother's. He was 12, I was 17. He wouldn't speak to my mom. He didn't have anything to do with her. He would speak to me. He was like a wounded little, it was awful that day. But his dad had just died. He had contracted leukemia, and I think it took like 6 months, and he was gone.
Wow. So he must have been young, like in his 40s?
He was in his 30s.
His 30s,
He was
wow.
young.
Yeah.
But it just wiped him out. Mm-hmm. And by that time, I had all the hatred and stuff, so I didn't have too many feelings about that other than, maybe things work out the way they're supposed to. But then my brother was the only one that I cared about during that process. But it was like, after all those years, it was like pain on top of pain on top of pain, because he didn't want anything to do with my mom. He didn't want anything to do with us. And he wanted to stay with his grandmother. And ultimately, that's what she ended up letting him do. It was just, that's going to be how it is. I mean, I never understood that, and I probably never will. But
Yeah.
honestly, for me at that age, after that happened, it was almost like he died.
Yeah, I mean,
In a
you
way.
just never know. You said you'll never understand that, like what conversations, like what they talked about, what went down, especially for a kid who's
Yeah.
developing. You just don't even know. But
was
but
so-
for you were a kid as well.
Yeah.
So I can see how the confusion, you just don't understand. Why wouldn't you want to come with your mom and me? You know?
No, it was like he had put a block up against, he didn't even remember us. And I'm like, I know you remember me, because I remember when I was 5.
Yeah.
And then he would start talking about stuff that he did remember. But it was, that was very painful. And after that, it was just like, this is just reality. And it, that kind of fed my rage and my problems that led me to where it led me. But fast forward to 2011, Facebook had just came out. It was a neat new platform. And they had these things called friend suggestions.
We still have those today, yes.
But it was when they first came out, when they started suggesting you to be friends.
Right.
And I was closing out the books for a day at Cairo's, and I was looking at something on Facebook because I used the Cairo's Cafe Facebook page to market my business. And it came up and it said, hey, you should be friends with Michael Mulkey. And that's my brother. And it just freaked me out. Started crying. So, of course, I clicked on it.
Yeah.
So I clicked on it, and there he is, my baby brother, grown man.
Wow.
It was crazy, but it wasn't like all good news. I found out, it didn't take me long to dig a little bit and find out he was in prison in Georgia somewhere. Mm-hmm. So he'd been in prison in Florida, and I was in prison in Georgia. What I ended up finding out was that from the time he was 18 years old, he'd been in and out of prison. He hadn't been out much. Mm-hmm. So I forget exactly how. I think I just looked him up and wrote him a letter.
In prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, he called me. So here we
okay.
are.
So he called you. Did that surprise you? Because the last time, the story you just told that you spoke to him, I guess. Well, I guess you spoke to him after prison. You reached out when you first got to prison. In 99, y'all exchanged a letter.
We say it was one letter.
Yeah.
We didn't talk on the phone or anything.
Okay, so he calls you.
Yeah.
How are you feeling when he calls you?
I don't know. I just started crying. I couldn't stop. I think I cried for like 3 days.
Wow.
Just my baby brother. And, and he's in prison, so I know some of that, what it feels like. So we had that connection. And he called me every day after that for the first little while.
Yeah.
It was...
Now we're just reconnecting, I guess. Like he was asking what was going on with you.
Yeah. And how that worked out, I found my brother. The stage was being set. And it was about that time that I got to a place where I knew that I had to expand Cairo's because I'd gone as far as I could go in the location that we were in. And I put out a Facebook message. If Cairo's were to open a second location where we could do dinner, would we want to go source? Would we want to go north, south, east, or west? Because, Birmingham's a big area. We could go north, Gardendale, Fultondale. We could go south, Alabaster, Pelham. We could go east, go towards Trustford. We could go west towards, like, Bessemer and all that stuff. So I put that out, and I think it was 900% uptick in my...
Oh, your Facebook,
the feed,
the stats.
That one thing, it was 900%, 948% engagement in the one night, and it was all for Gardendale, Alabama. Like the people here wanted come to Gardendale. But we'll get into that in another episode. But about the same time as when you were coming to Gardendale.
Yes.
So it's kind of neat the way our stories were parallel but different still.
Right. So you actually, to help trigger my memory, before we recorded, you looked up a bunch of pictures from this time frame.
Yeah, pictures are great.
Which is really awesome because it does bring me back to that place. Mm-hmm. And it brings me back to such a sweet time. And I don't know, it's just crazy to think about how much has changed since then.
Yeah.
I mean, so much has changed. And the older you get, I think you just appreciate everything more. You appreciate people, you appreciate time,
experiences, all the things. So
take us back to July the 3rd, 2010. That was, I turned 38 that day.
So July the 3rd, 2010, yes. I can't remember how much we talked about before, but I'd lived in Sweden.
We've covered all that.
Okay, I owned a condo. I don't know if I told you that I actually shipped all my stuff. Okay, so I'm flying into Birmingham, but I'm flying to move here for the first time. I always say I came back to Birmingham, but then I catch myself and say, well, I actually came here for the first time to live.
You came back to America.
Right, I came back to America. That's true. So after being there for 8 years, and it was funny because there was a false alarm a few years prior to that in 2008. I said I was going to move back to the States, and my parents were in Pensacola, and I was going to move back to Pensacola, and I did, and they had this huge parade with signs, like family parade, with signs like, welcome home, Haley. They had actually made buttons with my picture on it, which is hilarious. But literally within 3 months, I got offered a job and decided to go back.
Yeah.
And it was the biggest letdown, anticlimactic, psych your mind, going back to Europe.
And your parents were heartbroken over that.
They were heartbroken.
Especially your dad. I remember your mom telling me a story. Your dad was very bothered.
Yes. So fast forward 2010, I'm moving to Alabama, where they are, back to America for good. But of course, my dad and my mom and family were like, we'll see about that. I don't know.
They weren't sure?
Well, yeah, because they were kind of wounded or scarred from that last time. I had moved back for good.
Yeah.
So, but I knew it was different. It was very resolute in my mind, and I understand that they didn't want to believe that until they knew it for sure, know. But I knew it was different. And
can I do a side note real quick?
Yeah.
Your mom told me that she prayed every day that you were gone for 8 years that you would come home. She said she knew enough to know that she couldn't try to force you or, try to influence you, but that she could not stand the thought of you being on the other side of the planet, even though you're living your best life and doing your career and following your dreams. But she said, I knew Jesus was going to bring her home, and, that she's kept me on my knees all those years.
It's just funny because people that know me from here now, and they always, especially when my parents were alive, they you're so close to all your family. But back, it's not that I wasn't close to them, but I'm very much where I'm at is where I'm at. Yeah. And I'm not very good at staying in touch. I was not very good at staying in touch with even my parents. I mean, I did, of course, but I was just very engaged and had a full life somewhere else. And
well, I think that your personality is like that. You are in the moment.
Yeah.
That helps me. If we get in an argument, I'm the one that holds grudges. You don't even really hold grudges. You're like, okay, let's move on. Let's forget about it. So, yeah. I like that. But
So, anyway, I flew in July 3rd on your birthday. Didn't know you yet. And my parents had rented a lake house. So, they had moved to Gardendale. They were actually staying in some apartments in Fultondale with my grandmother, had moved out of her house of 55 years. She had dementia, and it was kind of time for her to need to be living. So they had rented an apartment until they found a house. They were thinking about building, but, they wanted it to be one that they loved, like a dream house. So it took some time to do that. So they were living in this Fultondale apartment. So they had rented this huge lake house for the 4th of July weekend.
That's fun.
So my aunt and my uncle and my cousin, they had all come to stay at this lake house.
Shout out to the Cubans.
My mom was already there, and my sister and her family, kids. And also my brother, who was not living in Alabama yet, he was living in South Carolina, drove down to be at this lake house. It was just going to be a really fun weekend. So my dad picked me up from the airport, just him.
So everybody was there?
No, everybody was not at the hotel. I mean, not the hotel, at the airport.
No, everybody was there at the lake house?
Everyone
Pretty
was
much
at the
your
lake
whole
house.
Immediate family?
Yes.
Aunt Nora, all the people. Yeah.
Yeah, so my dad picked me up from the airport, and we drove straight to the lake house where everybody already was. And it was just a really fun weekend, all to be together. It was right on the lake. We had the fireworks. And so, yeah, it was good. But that was the beginning of my journey in Alabama, knowing I was going to be living in Alabama.
Just go through the process of how I got to Gardendale, Alabama in 2012 for us to even bump.
Right. You gotta stop saying that. Yeah, so this is fascinating because I got to Alabama and Birmingham, lived in Birmingham, but my dad had his agency in Gardendale, which really, and then when I started working for him, gave me an opportunity to kind of plug in and meet people. And and so you getting to Gardendale was another story because your restaurant was somewhere else in Birmingham. Yeah. And so James K. Jones in Gardendale. Where do we start?
I guess at the beginning. I mean, I talked a few episodes back. Maybe it was season 3 of being in a car accident where I got hit by a drunk driver.
Right.
And somehow that changed my mind about fear in the future.
Yeah.
Because it was like I wasn't, it didn't scare me. Like I thought I was going to die and I was okay with that. Like I was Jesus, I trust you. But it changed my mindset going forward to like, why do I allow fear to stop me from doing the things I know I need to do? And we had, by that time, been in business in the Birmingham location for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And had just reached a wall. I mean, it was a small space. We were doing a huge catering operation. We were, branched out into doing weddings and events. But it was so hard to work out of that small space. And I really wanted a restaurant. My dream was to have like a full service, come eat breakfast, come eat lunch, come eat dinner kind of restaurant. And that wasn't going to happen, number one, in that space because it was too small. And number two, because of the location, it was in downtown Birmingham. And people will come into Birmingham in the morning to go to work, 40, 50,000 people at that time, according to the statistics. But then they leave around 5 and they're not coming back.
Right.
So to have a successful dinner business, you needed to be somewhere else, north, south, east, or west.
I actually don't know that I knew that you wanted to have a dinner business.
Oh, yeah. It always bothered me that I didn't do dinner.
Oh, okay.
And dinner's funner. I mean, lunch was, in the beginning, the first 4 or 5 years, it was nice to be free at night. But then I ended up finding out I wasn't free anyways because we had catering. We were always doing something.
Right.
So I wanted a full-service restaurant. I mean, that was what I wanted.
Yeah. So I know that the beginning of the last episode when I shared mostly, you had talked about being lured to Gardendale. You did mention that.
I don't know if lured was the right question. I put out the...
right. You mentioned that, the 900%.
Yeah, I put it out on a Facebook post on my Kairos Cafe Facebook page and just said, we're thinking about opening a second location. Would we want to go in the Birmingham area, north, south, east, or west?
Right.
And we got an overwhelming response from, it actually surprised me because I didn't really know many people in Gardendale.
Yeah.
They just went crazy. They were like, it was, I've never seen anything like it in business. And it was more than just lip service. I mean, our cafe and catering business after putting that out tripled. So we were just crazy busy. Like people were coming, it's only 15 minutes from Gardendale to downtown Birmingham on the south side where Kairos Cafe was. So, but they started coming. They wanted to know what kind of food and, they were trying to get me. They were coming at me. And it was so different from my first experience when we opened in Birmingham. If you go back to season 3, when we opened the Kairos Cafe in Birmingham, nobody knew we were there. And I had to go through, it was a hard process of just getting people to know that we were there. So this was different in that I felt wanted and it was crazy.
Sought after.
Yeah, and it was more than just, please come here and do your thing in Gardendale. It was, I started getting emails from businessmen that own businesses in Gardendale encouraging me. I started getting calls and meetings, people wanting to be investors. The mayor of Gardendale, Outta Phillips, he invited me, publicly invited me to come up to Gardendale. So we set up an appointment with him.
How did he publicly invite you?
On their Facebook thing.
Oh. Wow.
And after he made a public invitation for me to come to Gardendale, a reporter from the Birmingham News caught on to that and this is weird. There's something special about this happening here. This is weird. So she called and she wanted to do an article. And I said, I haven't decided. I mean, this was just 3 or 4 days after. And she said, well, we published a North Jefferson issue of the Birmingham News, and we'd like to put this on the front cover. And so I said, well, I think that's silly to do that because I haven't decided that I'm doing that. I just put some feelers out. It wasn't really, we're going to start tomorrow. But she said, this is a hot story up here, and I really want to do it. It'd be good for your business whether you did it or not. And so she came and did a huge cover story.
That is, I mean, us having started businesses, I mean, I can see how it's refreshing.
It was crazy.
To feel like you're being, sought after like that.
But, I mean, it felt good.
Yeah, of course.
But no, looking back on it now, I got caught up in the hype of it. And even Steve, he and I would have a big misunderstanding about this later on. After they did that article in the Birmingham News, I can remember where I was when we were talking on the phone. And he was still my business partner at that time. And he was like, oh, you got to do it now. You got to do it. You're in there. Your goose is cooked. You got to do it. And, I felt like that was another green light. He was my pastor. He was my business partner, all the things. So when we started that process, it was Gardendale. We didn't even look anywhere else.
We were in the kitchen cooking, and it was like a lunch rush. Denise came through and just blurted out, James is turning down the catch of the century. And she spun on her heels and rushed out of the kitchen. And Jeremy said, who is she talking about? And I said, she's talking about some bossy girl up in Gardendale. Some bossy girl up in Gardendale she thinks she wants to set me up with. And he was like, oh, yeah, you wouldn't do good with a bossy girl. That wouldn't work out for you. So I didn't think anything else about it. But when I got home that night, something about her, just the way that she just looked at me and was like, whatever you're doing, you're messing it up. You're turning down the catch of the century.
But it's funny because when now we've talked about all that you're going through and we're dealing with and handling or whatever, I can see how just I don't need another thing.
I don't need anything else to add to this. And who would want me right now?
Also, something to think about.
I mean, even my friends didn't want to be around me because I was so depressed and going through so much anxiety. Mm-hmm. I mean, they did, but it's just when you're in that kind of situation, you just need a minute to process and figure it out. But I got home that night, and her comment was bothering me. So I texted her, and I said, Denise, why do you think that Haley Ann Hobart is the catch of the century for me? And she sent back a text. It was at least 3 paragraphs long. She was extolling the virtues of Haley.
Which is funny because I didn't even know her that well.
Well, but she admired you.
Okay.
And she started coming to your little business things for Kairos.
Yeah.
Because I went one time, and then I said, I'm not going to be doing all that, Denise. Yeah. We can do it, but you do it. I'm not doing it. I'm not going and sitting in them long meetings. But she said, she's a go-getter. She has a business mind. She's beautiful. She's talented. She's creative. She's a leader, blah, blah, blah.
Gosh, I need to hang out with Denise again.
She ended it with, and besides all that, she has great teeth. It's like, Denise, you sound like you got a crush on her. Almost automatically, without thinking, I think this was a Tuesday night, I texted you, and I said, and guys, this is the romance. I was very romantic in what I did. I texted you, and I said, hey, I got a P.F. Chang's gift card for my birthday, and it's about to expire. You want to go to dinner Friday night? I was just kind of putting myself out there. I didn't know. I mean...
Oh, gosh.
But then you said yes.
Let's go to the first date then. We meet at McDonald's.
You were late. You sent a text and said that you were a time optimist. And I was like...
And I am.
What does that mean? That's the first time I'd ever heard that. Like who is this girl? This bossy girl from Gardendale using all these big words. Time optimist. What does that even mean? So it means you're going to be late. Why don't you say, hey, I'm running late.
So I'm optimistic with my time. And
Well, you're late, but I met you there. You got in. I was very nervous, but I also didn't have any expectations because I felt like I don't even care no more. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to act like... Because up to that point, when I dated a girl, I always tried to act like they wanted me to act. And I was just over that. If you don't want me for me, then move on, nerd. But at the same time, I felt like I had no shot with you anyways. So we were just going out to dinner. And might as well, I love P.F. Chang's, might as well love dinner and be done with it. And I was telling myself this will get Denise off my back. But at the same time... There was something about it was exciting, but it was more scary for me than it was exciting. But when we got to P.F. Chang's, there was a wait, and I think it was like a 45...
I was going to say, it was a long wait.
It was about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. Mm-hmm. And we just sat out in that little entryway and just talked. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what it was, but it was just refreshing for me that I could just talk to you and just be myself. And you seemed genuinely interested in me. You were telling me about your family, your dad, your mom, all things.
I was genuinely interested in you.
I know, but there was something about that first date where I felt like I could be myself, all of me, strengths and weaknesses, and be honest. And it was kind of like a level of freedom that I'd only ever experienced in my life with my granny. And, I was still grieving her death. She'd only been gone like 6 months by then.
Right.
But she was, and I'm not saying that to down my mom or to down anybody else. It was just when I was with my granny, I could be me. And she loved everything about me. And not that she wouldn't challenge me to change things or do things better, but that had been taken from me. And my granny wasn't here anymore. And somehow I was feeling that with you, and it was just like I would start feeling like emotional and then feel like, oh, you need to like back up.
Lock that down.
This ain't gonna work out. You finna go bankrupt and no girl, ain't nobody studying you. But I remember when we sat down for dinner, I think you knew I went to church and all things, and you were like, would it be okay if I order a glass of wine? Like asking the question. I was like, only if I can get a beer. And
see, I didn't know how you felt about that, and for me that was like,
no, you could tell.
Sounds crazy, but for me, I think told my mom.
Yeah, that would be a game changer.
And Terry. Well, I said I need to be able to feel free to like.
Yeah, be yourself.
When I go out to a nice dinner, like I want to have a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And I need to feel like that's okay.
But you could tell that you were asking me like in the church way, like, is this going to be okay? Is it's going to offend your spirituality, kind of thing. And I thought that was so cute. And I think you got up and went to the bathroom. Denise was texting me during that, and I was like, she just ordered a glass of wine, so I think we're on a good start. Because she was rooting for us. Like, she was hot and heavy. Like,
you want to hear something funny about that ordering a glass of wine?
What?
Is that, I don't know if you remember this, but the wine that I ordered, there was only a little bit left in the bottle or something.
I don't remember.
And I had made up my mind, like, I don't want to, like, have too much wine, so just try to have one glass, even though normally I would have two, etc. But, like, there was only a little bit left in the bottle that I ordered, so they brought me that. And we're like, we're going to bring you another glass because, we didn't have enough or something like that. And I remember thinking, yes, I'm going to get a little more than a glass.
But we had the best dinner, the best time, the best talk. It was the best date I'd ever been on in my life. And I remember that was when I was really into social media in those days. Mm-hmm. Like that was, first couple of years it was out. So you want to document everything, take a picture of everything.
Yeah.
And I took a picture of our food, and I said I was out on a date, but I didn't say who with. So it's like it created this like buzz and a stir. I actually did that our first 3 dates. I didn't introduce you to that world until a couple months in. We got to the end of the dinner, and you were going up to Texas for Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. So you were going to be gone for like a week. So how did we plan the next thing?
Gosh, I feel like maybe it was planned like when I was gone that we said we were going to plan something, but then...
No, we went ahead and planned a date.
Oh, we did? Okay.
But it was like, it would be after Thanksgiving. So this was like mid-November. Mm-hmm. You were going out of town. You're going to Texas to spend Thanksgiving with your family and all these things. And you were going to be gone for like a week or so.
Yeah.
And then when you came back, then we were going to have a second date.
Yeah.
Like we planned it that night. Mm-hmm. And I remember like just like my mind like, how can this be happening? I mean, right now, like how can this be happening right now in the middle of my worst time of my life? How could I be planning a second date with this girl? It didn't make any sense, but I was just like, yeah, and do you remember all that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you're better at remembering all the details, but and here's the thing though, you got to remember like my perspective was totally different because I still at this point, I mean, I knew a little, but I mean, even hearing you tell it here right now while I'm sitting, we've been married 8 years, I feel like I have a better appreciation, understanding of everything you were like dealing with and going through. Mm-hmm. Even now, so imagine back then we had like one long conversation I was just kind of like, ooh, I'm still intrigued. I'm still like very fascinated, interested. I really like him. Like I guess from my standpoint, it was a lot simpler. It was a lot just like, I like him. We're going on a second date. Like, he better plan to pay. You know what I'm saying?
It was neat. It was just something like I just knew that I was supposed to have another date with you. Mm-hmm. The drive home, we still talked all the way home. When I took you to your car at McDonald's and dropped you off. When I got home that night and was getting ready for bed, I was like, something different is happening here. And I understand it, and it scares me a little bit, but it feels right. And it feels like nothing I've ever experienced before. Well, what happened was I was going to ask you to marry me on Valentine's, but I knew you were expecting me to pop the question. But I like to be controlled. And I don't like to do things. People, if they're expecting me to do something, I always try to do something different. Still.
Yes.
The girl that was waiting on you came back there and was like, I ain't going back out there. She's mad about her dessert.
That is not true.
She don't understand why everybody else got their dessert and she don't. So you need to come do what you need to do. And so Brandon was helping me, and I think we made a video of that. They did.
Someone made a video of you like starting back in the kitchen.
It was Brandon. He videoed me from the back. So we walk out there. I hand you your dessert, and you're like, "Oh." But then,
what was that like? You didn't finish that. Oh.
You were just happy to see me, and then you were happy to have your dessert. And
yeah, because I hadn't really seen you the whole dinner.
No,
I've been busy. Yeah.
And I asked you to read the little Taco Bell hot sauce thing.
So I read the "Will you marry me?" and I think it took me a minute to register, and then I like kind of got this panic, and I like leaned into you. Were you on your knees at that point?
No, I was trying to get you to read it, and then I was going to do the thing.
So I read it, and I like kind of leaned into you, and I like whispered in your ear, like, "Have you talked to my mom?" I just wanted to make sure, like, this wasn't, because I could just see the whole thing being
a disaster.
Not a disaster, but more like stressful. Because I'm very like I can read a room and people, and that if she was uncomfortable or felt like hurt or any kind of thing, because remember the things were still fresh for my dad, and that was like I was hypersensitive about that. That I just knew that I couldn't fully like embrace the moment if you hadn't, you know. So so I said, "Have you talked to my mom?"
I think I said yes. Now I don't mess this up.
Yeah. I think so too. But then I could relax, like, oh, okay, good.
Well, she came running over. She wanted to read the thing.
Yeah. So and then you dropped down on your knee.
Well, I used to call you my miss.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that too.
That was how I asked you. I said, "Miss, will you be my missus?"
Yeah.
And you said, "I will."
I said, "I will." And then,
then everybody started hollering.
It was very sweet.
Because everybody in the restaurant knew that was happening except you.
Yeah.
And I was nervous. I was very nervous. I don't like being the center of people looking at me. I feel like I'll do fine, but if I feel like everybody's looking at me, I get awkward and I don't know what to do with my hands. And I had practiced, I was going to hold my hands together, and I think Terry was telling me how to stand. The doors opened up, and the girls started coming in. The music was beautiful. The first one I think that walked down was your cousin Katie, and she was just, eyes were locked on me. She was so excited, smiling at me. And then Val came through, your sister-in-law, Hubby's wife, and she's smiling at me. And she was actually pregnant with Sam at that time. And then your best childhood friend, Meredith, who I had not met, I don't think, up until that time, walked down the aisle. And all the ones that came before her stopped and smiled at me before they went and took their place. And she didn't even meet my eyes. And it was like, it made me feel like, oh, like something's wrong with me. Like, why didn't she look at me? Is there something I need to know? Like, my mind was playing all these scenarios.
Yeah.
But then Abby came in, she was doing it. She was smiling. And everybody was just beautiful. Everything was neat. And Jones and Emerson and Kelsey, they were just little bitty. They come running.
Those are my nieces and nephews, yeah.
They come walking down the aisle with this big banner that said, "Uncle James, here comes your bride." And that was so cute, except Jones stopped. And he was like, "I'm done with this," in the middle. So Abby had to go get them. But then it opened up and Molly came in, your niece. Mm-hmm. And was she like 6 at the time? She was the flower girl.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
But she had broke her arm, so she was in a cast. But she had it decorated with ribbons. And she walks down and took her little job so serious, she dropped every pedal. And then she got to me and she stopped and was standing in front of me. And I was like, what is happening? And everybody's still looking at me. And she's like digging in her cast, and it took her a minute, but she pulled out a note. And the note was from you. And it was really cute. And I was just... I don't know, just all the emotions.
Yeah.
So then they kept the door closed, and I'm waiting, and everybody's looking at me, and then this bell started ringing. It was like, dong.
It was the church bells, yeah.
Dong, but did like 4 times, and I almost passed out.
Because it was 4 o'clock.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
It was, but it wasn't like dong, 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 dong. It was like dong.
I mean, people
dong.
have heard these church bells. They're very robust.
And long.
Yeah.
It was a long pause.
Clearly, this had an effect on him.
Everybody was looking at me, and I didn't understand what was happening, and I felt like I was...
What do you mean you didn't understand what was happening?
I didn't... If I would have been prepared for the long dings, like, okay, you're going to stand up there, they're going to ding these bells for 5 minutes, then I probably...
Was not 5 minutes.
It seemed like 5 minutes.
It was not.
It was...
It was a couple seconds.
I almost passed out.
Okay.
I don't know. I was like, I don't know if it was fear or what.
Yeah.
I don't know what was happening. But then the doors popped open, and there you were with your brother. Mm-hmm. And the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you, babe.
So then we did all the vows, said the I do's, kissed the bride. I gave you a good kiss, too.
You did. To this day, Lula calls it the wedding kiss because she's seen that video.
Yeah.
And she said, the kiss that people do when they get married.
What kiss
And I was
is that?
like, what kiss is that? And she always, opens her mouth and goes, I'm like, okay. Yeah. We'll keep calling that the wedding kiss. And that.
But we did the deed. They played the song, Something Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I know, Mr. Jones and Me.
Yeah.
Everybody started hollering when they started doing Mr. Jones and Me.
Yeah, that was fun.
Here we go.
So, we're married now.
And we're riding off into the sunset.
And this complete...
Actually, it wasn't sunset. We were riding off into the dark with Mountain Dew cans.
Yeah.
Sparklers all
and
around.
Sparklers, and headed to our honeymoon. And I think we've decided this is how we're ending this season. So this is a season finale.
This will be the season finale to season 4.
Yeah.
We fully intended for season 4 to be the last season of the Straight Outta Prison podcast. Mm-hmm. And I would be cool if we stopped with this. But we did some polling with our patrons and people that follow us. And so we're going to at least have to come back and do a season 5.
We're just going to kind of, in season 5, give you highlighted... kind of just seasons that we've walked through since getting married and
with
the
first
businesses,
couple years of marriage, being parents,
the blood, the sweat, the tears, the business stuff, how that all came to be. So but it's going to be good.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the podcast.
Written and produced by the Team Jones Company.
Yours truly, James and Haley Jones. If you like what you've heard, you can subscribe to all of our podcasts on Apple, Google, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeart, or really just about anywhere you enjoy listening to podcasts.
Most of you know about the Straight Outta Prison podcast, and we want you to know we've added 2 new platforms.
The For Real Reel, where we talk about real life, things you would never see on a highlight reel.
Things that might make you blush and might make you question some things that you never thought about. Unpack the week's hot button issues, current events.
Along with the weekly Jamesism and Haleyism. Now you have to tune in to find out what that means.
Tune in
in to find out what that means.
And Narrowing the Gap, where I'm sharing with Haley the lessons I learned in getting from where I was to where I was supposed to be.
Narrowing the Gap is a teaching companion to the Straight Outta Prison podcast, where he really digs into some of the profound lessons that he learned and had to walk out in his journey in prison and coming out of prison.
Or download the Patreon app and you can get all of our content early and ad-free. Straight Outta Prison podcast, the For Real, and Narrowing the Gap.
Listen on Apple, Google, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.
Other ways you can support us is to like and share the episodes of the podcast, leave us a rating and a review,
and support our sponsors. They help us provide this platform for free.
Thank you guys for listening to the podcast.
And again, thank you guys for being a part of our story.
Getting anything out of these videos, please hit the like button, the subscribe. If you never want to miss a recipe or anything I do, hit the little bell and you'll get notifications.